Okay, welcome to the first podcast episode of Teen Focus. I'm going to be your host, Chad Carney, and we're going to talk about teens, problems teens face, parenting a teen, being a teen. We're going to have a little bit of everything to do with teens and teenagers and parents of teens. So, thanks for joining me. It is my first podcast, so bear with me here in the home office. I'm Chad Carney. I am the student pastor at a local church. Deal with teenagers all the time. One of the other things that I do is I teach. We go to high schools and middle schools, and we talk to students about sex ed, unique choices, abstinence program, pornography addiction, all of those things. And so I thought, that'd be a good podcast for teens to understand that there are people out there that understand what they're struggling with and what they're going through, and that their parents out there might enlighten them maybe some things they didn't know. So we're just going to kind of jump into it and see where it takes us. As I started to think about what I wanted this first episode to be about, I came up with several different ideas, and the first one is I want to talk about the pressure that these teenagers are under. They have so much pressure in their life, pressure that, so I'm 45, and I have, it's been a while since I've been a teenager, but the pressures these kids are under now compared to the pressures that we were under as teenagers is a totally different mindset and a totally different set of pressures. So when I set out to kind of figure out what pressures they were under, I asked some of my youth students, I asked other teenagers that I knew, just kind of took some polls and kind of just took all that data and rolled it into, basically there are three types of pressures that our teens are under. So the first one would be external pressure. Pressure that comes from the outside, not pressure that the students put on themselves, not pressure that they feel internally, but pressure that comes from the external. Think about your parents. Their parents probably the number one source of external pressure. That external pressure is how they parent, their parenting style, how they handle discipline problems, the goals that these parents have for their kid. Think about the high schooler in America. They are on the fast track for college. Their parents are like, well, you got to get good grades. You got to perform well in school. You got to do great on tests. Or you got the opposite end of that spectrum where you're just trying to get the teenager to school, out of bed, and to school on time. You've got those parental pressures coming in. Maybe another form of external pressure would be maybe you're not maybe the teen's not living in the nuclear home with the father and mother, but living with step parents or single moms, or living with dad or grandparents. So you've got all these different pressures coming on to the kids, and so they deal with it, and they deal with it hard. And you'll have parent shopping as teenagers, and things that they are wanting to try to get one parent to do, or got parents fighting back and forth, using the kid as the go-between. So you've got those kind of pressures are the external pressures that parents can put on them. Cleaning your room, taking care of your car, being nice, being kind to your siblings. Those are other pressures that are also external pressures from parents. Then you got teachers. Teachers are putting external pressure on the kids. They've got to behave. If you've been to the schools lately, there's great kids that behave real well, and then you got kids that don't behave so well, for a lack of a better word. Then I put youth pastors and pastors on there, since I am one, and I apply pressure to some of them just to, you've got to act the way in accordance to Christianity and the rules, and you've got to follow Christ, and you've got to love people that you not necessarily like, and so it's about growing there. And I put pressure on them. I push them to talk to their friends and That is pressure. Maybe your teen has a job and then they've got bosses that are going to be putting pressure on them, pressure to perform at this job, show up to this job, um, pressure to uh, dress a certain way, act a certain way, learn responsibilities. Those take some pressures. Another external pressure can be coaches. If your kid plays sports or your kid is an athlete, cheerleader, gymnastics, swimming, golf, tennis, whatever sport that your kid is involved in, there's going to be pressure by those coaches, pressures to perform, pressures to win, because that's how coaches keep their jobs. Pressure to be the best that they can, certain weight, certain sizes, run certain distance, certain speeds, times, all those things that come along with sports and coaches. Another external pressure, and one that as your teenager gets a little older, they'll definitely have either a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And there is a lot of pressure there. Think about all the pressure around them from their peers, oh, well, they've got such a great relationship. Or the promposals. Everybody's got to have this big to do about going to homecoming or going to coronation or going to prom. And at 45, I don't understand it. I was more of a, hey, girl, you want to go? Yeah, all right. It's a date. But now you got to go around the world to get a girl to go to prom or homecoming or coronation with you. So, boyfriend and girlfriend pressures, and that's also going to include some sexual pressure. Our teenagers live in a world of external pressure about sex, so there's sexual pressure on them from boyfriends, from girlfriends. Used to be all the boys were like Pepe Le Pew and was having to chase girls. Pepe Le Pew is a skunk for the young crowd that doesn't know. He would always be hopping, chasing the girl, and that's not the case these days. These girls will chase and all of those kind of things. They'll text and call and FaceTime and Instagram and message and Snapchat. It's all out there. So they're always out in the pursuit, and they're like, oh my goodness, he's so cute. But they have sexual pressure that comes from the outside world, from their TVs, movies, music, everything that they kind of are around from the outside has that sexual pressure. And we live in such a sexualized society. Then it's on your TV, it's in your music. I mean, if you'll look at the Netflix top 10 in America, you'll find a lot of sex in those shows or movies. Finished watching one on Netflix called The Queen's Gambit, and plenty of sex and promiscuity in there. So, along with chess, and I mean, it's in every show that your teenagers watch. And then they have sexual pressure from their girlfriends or boyfriends, and that's just kind of the idea. Another one that the students gave me, another form of external pressure, is siblings. Now, I'm an only child, so I didn't think about the pressure of siblings, wasn't on my initial list. But sibling rivalry, why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like your sister? Your brother did this, why don't you do that? And they sometimes get lost, and the individuals get lost, and you're being compared to your older siblings as a younger sibling. And then as the older sibling, you're going to be held as some of them say, we were the guinea pigs for the parenting at the house. So, you have those issues, and they are strong within those siblings, is what I've come to learn by talking to a different sibling. They're like, oh yeah, my older sister, she was a brainiac and got a scholarship. And I'm not very smart, and I'm not a great student. So just all these pressures, and again, that can come from being the sibling, that can come being the sibling that's everybody's looking up to, and of course that comes from your parents. So external pressure is the number one type of pressure that these teens face on a daily basis. Number two is internal pressure, pressures that you put on yourself. We know that when we were in high school, and these kids in high school and middle school, everybody has cliques. They have their own social groups that they run with. Everybody wants to be social. Everybody wants to go to the cool parties. Everybody wants to be liked. It's just our innate nature to want to be liked. So you have some internal social pressures. You want to be popular. You want to be liked. Even if you're like the social outcast, you still think to yourself, I want to be liked. And then if you are in the social groups, you're trying to maintain and stay there and keep that status. And I think that's tough on these kids socially. As you wander the school halls, you will see the social groups, and there's pressures that go with it. Then you've got internal academic pressures. I never had that. I was thinking about that when I wrote. I was like, I didn't have any internal academic pressures. I was C's and D's, get degrees was what I was told. But some students are very, very focused on academics, and it causes internal pressures. It causes anxiety. It gets teenagers flustered and frustrated because they are learning harder subjects at an earlier age. So the academic pressures, the homework, trying to study for tests, all of these things create a lot of pressure for these kids. Academic pressures, internal pressures on you academically. Then you've got athletic pressure. If you're an athlete, you'll have pressures to perform. You'll pressure yourself. You want to be the best, and you want to perform well, and you want to win, and you want your team to win, and you want to represent your school and your coaches and your family well. And so there's a lot of internal pressures when it comes to being athletics. You've worked hard, you put in the effort, and so when it comes time to compete, there's a lot of pressure there. My daughter runs track and does hurdles, and when it comes time for them to be there at the meets, all these athletes are like a cat on a hot tin roof. They're nervous and fidgety, and so it's real. They have internal pressures about relationships. This is the one. This is the one. All these relationships at these young age are like a Shakespearean drama. Everything's over dramatic, but they have these relationships, and they put pressure from the internal. I've got to be the best girlfriend or boyfriend in the world. What do you know about that at that age? You don't. You're just modeling what you see. And so relationships cause internal pressures. You got hobbies that cause internal pressures. You want to be good at things. You're in these extracurricular clubs. When I was in high school, I was a nerd and was in chess club, but I like things that are competitive, and chess was competitive, and so I was in the chess club, and I wanted to do well, so the hobbies would give me stress. And I think a lot of kids have that. They like to be competitive. I like competitive things. I love board games still, so I like to be competitive, and I think kids like to be competitive at some of their hobbies and extracurricular activities, but those give you internal pressure to study, to work hard, to just perform. All right, some more internal pressure is financial pressure. Now, I know that's odd for you to think about a teenager having financial pressure, but not every kid in America lives in a household where there's tons of money and all their needs are met, and some of their wants are met, and they're getting Lexus for their 16th birthday, and not everybody lives in that fantasy land. Some of these kids out here are just trying to scrounge up enough money to get food, and some of them go to school just to get fed, so they can have 3 meals in a day, maybe. So you have to kind of be aware of that when you talk about why students are what they are and how they behave. And that comes from some financial issues. You have kids that grow up in a single parent household, or they're living with their grandparents who get a SSI check and not getting child support, so money's tight. and they don't have everything the other kids have. They don't have those possessions, and that gives you some internal pressures. I need money, and so these kids are working these jobs, working 40 hours a week, going to school full time. So I mean, that's tough. And my hat's off to those kids that work 40 hours a week and go to high school. And I mean, you just have to admit that that's pretty impressive, and that they themselves are working hard. And, hard work goes a long ways, and it's to be commended, but it does cause internal pressures again, and external pressures, bosses and such. And then you've got the financial side of it. They're working because they need the money. And are they learning how to manage money and live on a budget and have money and not live paycheck to paycheck already? It'd be a great thing for them to learn. And then another internal pressure is sexual pressure. As we talked about in the external pressures, there's a lot of sexual pressure in the culture, but inside you have your own sex drive. You're developing, the hormones are developing in these teenagers. You're developing, you can talk to those teenage boys and hear that voice crack, and we've all been through that. And so they're going through that, and you got these hormones raging, and so everybody thinks they want to be an adult, and then you got the other lie that everybody's having sex except for you, which is not true either. So they have this internal pressure about sex, sexual pressure. Read a study for social media that over 60% of the teenagers between the ages of 13 and 18 have sent a risque picture to a significant other. And it's over 60% of the teenagers have done that. And of course, there's a lot of that sent back and forth across your social media sites, Instagram, Snapchat, all of those things. And so you have those sexual pressures. Everybody's doing it, so I should be doing it too. That's crazy talk. Am I going to sound like a parent? My parents here, like, well, if everybody else is jumping off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? Oh, that's crazy. But it's true. Not everybody's having sex, and even though they think about it. All right, then we come to the one that we're all used to and accustomed to from that age, and that is peer pressure. Okay? Peers are the people in your age group, your socioeconomic group, your group, those kids that you're with every day, you see, and that you compare yourself to. It doesn't change just because you get out of high school and graduate. You still have peer groups until you die. You're going to have those peer groups. So peer pressure is that pressure. It comes from the peers around you. Again, we talked about groups and your social groups and all of those. You got to hang out. The cheerleaders all hang out together, and the football team hang out together, and this clique and that clique, and all of those things down. Some of the other peer pressure you can think about is, think about the wardrobe, right? I mean, we don't think about it, but you go through a middle school or high school, and there's a lot of people dressed alike. Everybody's got to have the latest fad, the latest fashion, and that's always true. It's always been true, right? Everybody had parachute pants at one time in the 80s. Had that acid wash jeans. Everybody had something acid wash, or a denim jacket with 400 buttons on it. Or you had to have a Swatch watch. Everybody was on fads when I was a kid, and they still are, and everybody's got to have them. So nothing new there, but it is peer pressure. There are at least 3 makeup stores here in town. And maybe I missed it growing up or didn't pay much attention, but some of the teenage girls brought up to me, your makeup and hair just seems got to be on point every day. Everywhere you go, your makeup and hair, every morning I gotta get up and do it. It's gotta be on point. So, makeup, hair, that's a big, obvious. Now look, hygiene's not that big an issue for teenage boys. If you've not been around any, I promise you it's not that big an issue for them, right? I mean, they don't know that deodorant goes up and down more than one time. I mean, some of them just kind of right by it without getting it on them, I think. But Teenage boys' hygiene, hair and makeup, not a big issue. But for teenage girls' hair and makeup, big issue. And that's what the girls told me. I was kind of surprised, but they said, oh yeah, your makeup's got to be on point, your hair's got to be on point, everything. And I said, well, why does it matter? And they brought me to this point. Well, you got to look good on the Snapchats or on the Instagram. Technology is a peer pressure used in today's society that we, as adults at 45, I didn't have in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have that, thank goodness. But the kids these days do, and they have a presence on all of those sites. And one of the things I have learned about them is they don't get enough likes, they don't get enough clicks, they don't get enough this, that, the other. Then they are going to delete that picture, but they're going to have every filter on it they can get. They're going to make sure it looks right. They're going to be holding their cups just right, making sure that you can see what they're drinking, where they're at, all the brands around them. They're going to do all of those things. And so the technology, the Snapchat, the Instagram, everybody's got to have those things in their life. And it does put peer pressure on them. They got to get so many likes. They got to be popular. How many people, how many subs you got on TikTok? Of course, TikTok's like a black hole. Once you start watching TikToks, 2 hours later, you're like, where does 2 hours go? Bottom of the barrel now. And there's some funny, great humor on there and some fun stuff, but like everything, how to has a dark side. So you got to be careful there. And then peer pressure about sex. Of course, sexual peer pressure is as old as time, right? And you've got people around you having sex, putting, why aren't you having sex? Sex fell under all three categories. Internal pressure, external pressure, and peer pressure. All three of those have a sexual pressure in them to go with it. So one of the things that when I wanted this podcast to be for teens, and I wanted it to be to parents of teens, so they could see that they're not alone. A lot of them feel alone. Research shows that 1 in 5 have had depression in the past 90 days, and 1 in 5 have had a depressive episode where they have thought about suicide. And so I thought this would be a good way to talk to teens, that people do understand what you're going through, and that we could talk to parents to kind of maybe give them some things that they don't realize. One of the things that parents say that I don't like is, these are the best years of your life. I promise you they're not the best years of your life. Those lay ahead. Because you're growing, you're awkward, you don't really have an identity yet, and that's what you're trying to fight and figure out. Who am I going to be when I grow up, and what am I going to do for a living, and where am I going to go to college, what am I going to do after I graduate, and does this boy like me, and does this girl like me, or all of those pressures that build upon our students and our teens. And it does cause them to stress, and they don't have necessarily healthy coping mechanisms at that age, so they don't understand, and they'll holler and scream and throw things, and everything's, like I said, a Shakespearean drama. So it's definitely noticeable that our teens have a lot of pressure on them. And if you've ever shook a can of Dr. Pepper, you feel that pressure build up, and that's the pressure that they're under in today's society. So we have to, as parents, be aware of it, and as people around teens, be aware of it, and just encourage them that we know that they have these kind of pressures going on in their life. And maybe you're a parent that didn't realize that your kid has all these pressures, and so maybe this would be a great way for you to talk to your kid and to maybe open up some dialogue. Because they don't like talk. They all are going to text. Every one of them's on their phone right now, texting somewhere. So maybe be a way to talk to them about it, get them to listen, see what their thoughts are, see if they agree or disagree. The Bible verse for this lesson comes from 1 Peter 5:7, which says, "Cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you." So if you're a student out there and you're hearing this, God does care about your stressors and the pressures that are facing you, and he cares about your life, and he wants you to be fulfilled and happy, and understand that the best days of your life are still forward for you. And I know it's hard being an awkward teenager at this age, and you're not quite there yet. You're growing, and so parents, I want you to understand that maybe just because your teens don't talk to you doesn't mean they don't listen or see what you're doing. So stay at it, talk to them, text them, keep up to date with them, snoop their phone. You need to check their phone, keep your eye on those things, so that way you kind of have an idea of what's going on in your child's life. So, okay, well, first podcast in the books. And I will have you another one next week. Thank you for joining me on Teen Focus with Shane Carney. I greatly appreciate it. If you liked it, let me know, subscribe, and if you didn't, well, maybe give me one more shot. I'll try better next time, okay? Thank you so much.